A reclusive billionaire went to pick up his niece from school. What he saw there would shatter his world forever. His housemaid was standing there with a little boy who looked exactly like him. When the child saw him, he whispered one word that changed everything. Dad. Secrets buried for 5 years came to light. A father who never knew he had a son. A mother who carried the weight of impossible choices. And a little boy who would bring them all together in ways no one could have imagined. A story of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart and remind you that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to love you. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and comment where you're watching from. The humid Tuesday afternoon hung heavy over the city as Marcus Blackwell brought his imported sedan to a slow stop in front of Westfield Academy, the most prestigious private school in the region. He had never imagined himself here, among the other parents and caregivers, waiting for children to emerge from behind those imposing brick walls. The only reason he found himself in this unfamiliar territory was a last-minute emergency. His sister had called that morning, frantic about a business trip that couldn't be postponed, begging him to pick up his 6-year-old niece Emma. Marcus drummed his fingers against the leather steering wheel, feeling oddly out of place in his perfectly tailored suit among the casual clothes of other waiting parents. He had spent the last 2 years of his life in self-imposed isolation, buried in work and solitude after losing his parents in a car accident that had shattered something fundamental inside him. Social interactions had become foreign, almost painful. Even this simple act of picking up his niece felt like stepping into an alien world. The distant sounds of children playing during recess drifted through his slightly open window, a symphony of laughter and shouting that seemed to belong to another universe. Marcus found himself watching the other parents, noting how they chatted easily with each other, how naturally they seemed to fit into this world of school pickups and playdates. He wondered if he would ever feel that kind of ease around other people again. That's when his eyes caught sight of a familiar figure moving through the small crowd of waiting adults. His breath caught in his throat as recognition dawned slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room. It was Elena Rodriguez, the woman who cleaned his house. She had started working for him just 4 months ago, recommended by his housekeeper who had needed to reduce her hours. Elena was quiet, efficient, almost invisible in the way she moved through his massive, echoing home. But here, outside the school, she looked different. Less like a shadow, and more like a real person with her own life, her own world. She was holding hands with a small boy, maybe 5 years old, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest as he studied the child's profile. The boy had straight, dark hair that caught the afternoon light, and when he turned slightly, Marcus could see the shape of his eyebrows, the line of his jaw. Something cold and electric shot through Marcus's veins. The resemblance was impossible to ignore, like looking at a photograph of himself as a child. He tried to shake off the absurd thought, telling himself his isolation had made him paranoid, seeing connections where none existed. But his eyes remained fixed on the boy, tracing every familiar feature with growing certainty. The child was chattering animatedly to his mother, his small hands gesturing as he spoke. Elena was listening with the kind of patient attention that spoke of deep love, nodding and smiling at whatever story he was telling. There was something beautiful about watching them together, something that made Marcus's chest ache with a longing he couldn't name. Then it happened. The boy's ball rolled away from the group of children he had been playing with, bouncing directly toward Marcus's car. The child ran after it, and as he bent to pick it up just a few feet from the passenger window, he looked up and made direct eye contact with Marcus through the glass. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The boy's eyes were dark brown, exactly like Marcus's own, and there was something in his gaze that went beyond simple curiosity. Recognition flickered there, impossible, but undeniable. The child straightened up, still holding his ball, and took a small step closer to the car window. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as the boy's lips parted slightly. In a voice barely above a whisper, hesitant and confused, the child said, "Dad." The word hung in the air between them like a question, like a prayer, like an accusation. Before Marcus could react, before he could even process what he had heard, Elena appeared beside the boy. Her face went pale as she saw Marcus sitting in the car, and her hand shot out to grab her son's arm. She pulled the child away quickly, murmuring something Marcus couldn't hear over the blood rushing in his ears. They disappeared into the crowd of parents and children, leaving Marcus alone in his car, staring at the empty space where they had been standing. The word echoed in his mind like a bell that couldn't stop ringing. Dad. The boy had called him Dad, but that was impossible. Elena had never mentioned having children. In the 4 months she had worked for him, she had been professional to the point of being almost invisible. They barely spoke beyond the basic necessities of her job. Marcus sat frozen in his driver's seat as other parents began loading their children into cars around him. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal against the earthquake that had just shifted something fundamental in his understanding of reality. His hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A tap on his passenger window startled him back to the present. Emma, his niece, was standing there with her pink backpack, looking puzzled. Marcus fumbled for the button to unlock the doors, his movements clumsy and disconnected. "Uncle Marcus? Are you okay?" Emma asked as she climbed into the back seat, her voice carrying the pure concern that only children can express. "You look funny." Marcus forced a smile as he adjusted his rearview mirror to look at her. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. How was school?" As Emma launched into a detailed account of her day, complete with drama about who sat with whom at lunch, Marcus drove on autopilot. His mind kept returning to that moment, to those eyes that looked so much like his own, to that single word that had turned his world upside down. That evening, after dropping Emma off at his sister's house, Marcus returned to his own home with new eyes. The massive house that had felt like a mausoleum for the past 2 years suddenly seemed different. He found himself looking for signs he had somehow missed, clues that should have been obvious. In the garden behind the house, tucked near the gardening shed where he never went, he spotted something that made his stomach clench. A small plastic truck, bright red and slightly dirt-covered, sat abandoned near a flower bed. How long had it been there? How had he never noticed it? Marcus walked slowly toward the toy, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel path. He knelt down and picked up the truck, turning it over in his hands. It was well-loved, the kind of toy a child carries everywhere and treasures beyond reason. The paint was worn off in places where small fingers had gripped it countless times. He looked up at the house, its windows glowing warm yellow in the growing dusk. Elena would arrive early tomorrow morning, as she did every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They would have to talk. There were questions that needed answers, truths that could no longer hide in the shadows of his willful blindness. But tonight, Marcus sat in his study with the small red truck on his desk, staring at it as if it held the answers to every question he had never thought to ask. Outside, the city hummed with its evening rhythms, but inside his house, silence stretched like a held breath. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Marcus's mood as he waited for Elena's arrival. He had barely slept, spending most of the night pacing his study and trying to piece together fragments of memory that might explain everything. The red truck sat on his kitchen counter like evidence in a case he was afraid to solve. Elena arrived at exactly 7:30, as she always did. Marcus watched from his study window as she parked her aging Honda in the staff parking area behind the house. She moved with her usual efficiency, gathering her cleaning supplies and walking toward the service entrance. But there was something different in her posture, a tension that spoke of someone bracing for impact. Marcus waited until he heard her moving around in the kitchen before making his entrance. She was loading dishes into the dishwasher, her back straight and her movements perhaps a little too careful. She didn't turn around when he entered, but her shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "Good morning, Elena," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. He moved to the coffee machine, part of his usual morning routine, but today it felt like theater. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," she replied, still not turning around. Her accent carried just a hint of her Mexican heritage, something he had never really paid attention to before. Marcus poured his coffee and took a sip, trying to find the right words. "How did you ask someone if they had been hiding your child from you for 5 years? How did you even begin such a conversation?" He cleared his throat. "Elena, I was wondering if we could talk for a moment." Her hands stilled on the dishes. Slowly, she turned to face him, and Marcus was struck by how young she looked. He realized he had never really looked at her before, not as a person with her own life and story. She was probably in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and intelligent brown eyes that were currently filled with something that looked like dread. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. Is there something wrong with my work?" Marcus set down his coffee cup and picked up the red truck from the counter. Elena's eyes immediately locked onto it, and the color drained from her face. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, as if she needed support. "I found this in the garden yesterday," Marcus said quietly. "I was wondering if you might know how it got there." Elena stared at the toy for a long moment, and Marcus could practically see her mind racing, calculating what to say, how much to reveal. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. My son must have dropped it when I brought him to work with me last week. The babysitter was sick, and I didn't have anywhere else to leave him. I know I should have asked permission first." Marcus felt something inside his chest tighten at her words. "Your son," he repeated slowly. "You never mentioned having a son." Elena's chin lifted slightly, a flash of defiance mixing with her obvious fear. "You never asked about my personal life, Mr. Blackwell. I didn't think it was relevant to my job." She was right, and Marcus felt a stab of shame at his own blindness. In 4 months of employing this woman, he had never asked about her life, her family, her dreams. She had been nothing more than a function to him, someone who appeared and made his house clean, and then disappeared again. "You're right," he said softly. "I should have. Tell me about him. Your son." Elena's expression grew wary. "His name is Diego. He's 5 years old. He's a good boy, very well behaved. I promise he won't bother you again if I have to bring him here." Marcus nodded slowly, studying her face. There was something in her eyes, a knowledge that went deeper than this simple explanation. "Elena," he said carefully, "yesterday I was at Westfield Academy picking up my niece. I saw you there with Diego." Elena went very still. Marcus continued, his voice gentle but insistent. "He's a beautiful boy. He looks very familiar." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Elena's breathing had become shallow, and Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly where they gripped the counter. Finally she spoke, her voice so quiet he had to strain to hear her. "I don't know what you're implying, Mr. Blackwell." Marcus stepped closer, and Elena's eyes darted toward the door as if calculating an escape route. "Elena, I think you do know what I'm implying. That boy, Diego, he called me Dad yesterday." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She actually staggered slightly, one hand flying to her throat. He doesn't know." "Doesn't know what?" Marcus pressed gently. "Elena, please, I need to understand what's happening here." Elena closed her eyes and took a shuddering breath. When she opened them again, there were tears threatening to spill over. "He doesn't know who you are," she whispered. "I never told him." Marcus felt the world shift around him. "But he is mine." "Diego is my son." Elena nodded once, a sharp jerk of her head that seemed to cause her physical pain. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, he's yours." The confirmation hit Marcus like a wave, even though he had known it from the moment he saw the boy's face. His legs felt suddenly unsteady, and he reached for the kitchen island to support himself. He had a son, a 5-year-old son who had been living in the shadows of his life without him ever knowing. "How?" he asked, though part of him was already beginning to remember. "When?" Elena wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. 6 years ago. I was an intern at your company, in the marketing department. You probably don't remember me." But Marcus was remembering now, pieces falling into place like a puzzle he had forgotten he was trying to solve. A company party, too much champagne, a beautiful young woman with intelligent eyes and a shy smile. A weekend that had felt like stepping outside of his carefully controlled life. "Maria Santos," he said suddenly, and Elena's head snapped up in surprise. "That was the name you used then." Elena nodded. "Elena Maria Rodriguez Santos. I go by my middle names now." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything. "You disappeared. After that weekend, you just vanished from the company." "I found out I was pregnant," Elena said simply. "I knew you weren't looking for anything serious. You were clear about that. And I was just an intern, a nobody. I didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you or take advantage." Marcus stared at her, feeling a complex mixture of emotions he couldn't untangle. Anger that she had kept this from him. Guilt that she had felt she couldn't tell him. Regret for all the time he had lost. And underneath it all, a growing sense of wonder at the fact that he had a son. "So you left," he said. "And you never tried to contact me. Not once in 5 years." Elena's expression hardened slightly. "What would have been the point? You had made it clear that weekend was just a moment of fun for you. I wasn't going to chase after a man who didn't want to be caught." Marcus felt the sting of her words because they carried the ring of truth. 6 years ago, he had been a different person. Focused entirely on building his empire, uninterested in emotional entanglements. He had probably given her every reason to believe he wouldn't welcome news of a pregnancy. "And now?" he asked. "You came to work for me." Was that coincidence? Elena shook her head. I knew who you were when I took the job. My original employer was downsizing, and I needed the work. When your housekeeper posted the position, I don't know what I thought. Maybe that it would be easier to keep an eye on you from a distance, to know what kind of man Diego's father had become. Marcus absorbed this information, trying to understand the courage it must have taken for her to walk into his house every day, to clean around him while carrying such an enormous secret. And what kind of man did you decide I had become? Elena studied his face for a long moment. Lonely, she said finally. Very, very lonely. The simple word hit Marcus harder than any accusation could have. Because she was right. He was lonely, had been lonely for longer than he cared to admit. The last 2 years had been especially isolated, but even before his parents' death, he had been building walls between himself and meaningful connection. I want to meet him, Marcus said suddenly. Properly, I mean. I want to know my son. Elena's expression became guarded again. Mr. Blackwell. Marcus. It's not that simple. Diego has a life, a routine. He doesn't understand why his father has never been around. I can't just introduce you and expect everything to be fine. Marcus felt a surge of desperation at the thought that she might deny him this chance. Then help me understand how to do this right. Please, Elena. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I'm asking anyway. Help me figure out how to be his father. Elena was quiet for a long time, studying his face as if trying to read his soul. Finally, she spoke. If you're serious about this, it has to be about Diego, not about you. It has to be about what's best for him, not what makes you feel better about missing the first 5 years of his life. Marcus nodded immediately. Of course. Yes. Whatever he needs. Elena sighed, and some of the tension left her shoulders. He's a good boy, but he's sensitive. He asks questions about his father sometimes, and I've always told him that his daddy wasn't ready to be a daddy yet. But that didn't mean he didn't love him. I didn't want him to feel abandoned or unwanted. Marcus felt his throat tighten at the thoughtfulness of her approach, at the way she had protected their son even while protecting herself. What do you think we should do? Elena glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall. I need to pick him up from school in a few hours. Maybe you could come with me. Not as his father, not yet, but as someone who wants to meet him. We can see how he reacts, how you react. Take it slow. Marcus nodded eagerly, then paused. Elena, I need you to know something. I'm not the same man I was 6 years ago. The man who made you feel like you couldn't tell me about Diego. I want to be better. I want to be the father he deserves. Elena's expression softened slightly. I hope so, Marcus. Because once we start this, there's no going back. If you're going to be in his life, you have to really be in his life. He's already lost too much consistency. Marcus felt a chill at her words. What do you mean, lost too much consistency? Elena looked down at her hands. His grandfather, my father, was the closest thing he had to a male role model. He passed away 8 months ago. Diego still asks when Abuelo is coming back. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just about his desire to know his son. It was about a little boy who had already experienced loss, who needed stability and love and presence. Marcus had never been responsible for another person's emotional well-being before, and the enormity of it was both terrifying and humbling. I won't let him down, Marcus said quietly. I won't let either of you down. Elena searched his eyes for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll see, she said. We'll see. The hours until school pickup crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus found himself unable to concentrate on anything, his mind spinning with questions and possibilities and fears. What would he say to Diego? How did you talk to a 5-year-old? What if the boy didn't like him? What if he said something wrong? Elena had gone about her work with quiet efficiency, but Marcus could sense the tension radiating from her. This was uncharted territory for both of them, and the stakes felt impossibly high. At 2:30, they drove to Westfield Academy in Marcus's car, Elena giving him directions in a voice that was carefully neutral. As they pulled into the familiar parking area, Marcus felt his palms begin to sweat. Through the windshield, he could see other parents and caregivers beginning to gather, the same scene he had witnessed the day before when his world had turned upside down. There he is, Elena said softly, pointing toward the school's front entrance. Marcus followed her gaze and felt his breath catch in his throat. Diego was walking out of the building with a small group of children, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight. Even from a distance, the resemblance was unmistakable. It was like looking at a photograph of himself as a child. Elena got out of the car, and Marcus followed, his legs feeling unsteady on the pavement. Diego spotted his mother immediately and broke into a run, his face lighting up with pure joy. The sight of that unconditional love and trust made something twist painfully in Marcus's chest. "Mama!" Diego called out, launching himself into Elena's arms. She caught him and spun him around, both of them laughing. It was such a perfect moment of connection that Marcus felt like an intruder just watching it. When Elena set Diego back on his feet, the boy's gaze wandered to Marcus, who was standing a few feet away. Recognition flickered in the child's dark eyes, the same recognition Marcus had seen the day before. "Who's that?" Diego asked his mother, but his eyes remained fixed on Marcus. Elena knelt down to Diego's level, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "This is Mr. Blackwell, baby. He's a friend of Mama's from work. He wanted to meet you." Diego studied Marcus with the intense scrutiny that only children can manage. "You're the man from yesterday," he said matter-of-factly. "You were in the car." Marcus knelt down as well, bringing himself to Diego's eye level. Up close, the resemblance was even more startling. Diego had his eyes, his mouth, even the same small scar on his chin that Marcus had gotten falling off his bike at age 6. "Yes, I was," Marcus said softly. "I'm sorry if I scared you yesterday. I was just surprised to see you." Diego tilted his head to one side, a gesture so familiar that Marcus had to suppress a gasp. It was exactly what Marcus did when he was thinking hard about something. "Why were you surprised?" Diego asked with the directness that comes naturally to children. Marcus glanced at Elena, who gave him a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. "Because," Marcus said carefully, "you remind me of someone very important to me." "Who?" Diego pressed. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Myself when I was your age." Diego considered this information with the seriousness of a small philosopher. "Mama says I look like my daddy," he said, "but I never met my daddy." The innocence in those words nearly broke Marcus's heart. Here was his son, standing 3 feet away from him, talking about a father he had never known. Marcus had to grip his hands together to keep them from shaking. "What else does your mama tell you about your daddy?" Marcus asked gently. Diego glanced at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "She says he wasn't ready to be a daddy when I was born, but that he loves me anyway, even if he can't be here. And she says maybe someday I'll get to meet him." Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Elena had been so generous in her explanations to Diego, so careful to preserve the possibility of connection even while protecting them both from abandonment. She could have easily painted Marcus as a villain, could have told Diego his father didn't want him. Instead, she had kept hope alive. "That sounds like a very wise mama," Marcus said, looking up at Elena with gratitude. Diego suddenly stepped closer to Marcus, studying his face with intense curiosity. "Mr. Blackwell, do you have any kids?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus met Elena's eyes over Diego's head, seeing his own uncertainty reflected there. This was the moment of truth, the point where they had to decide how honest to be. "I'm hoping to," Marcus said finally. "I'm hoping to very much." Diego nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Kids are fun," he announced. "I'm 5. How old are you?" Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling at the boy's matter-of-fact approach to life. "I'm 32. That's pretty old, isn't it?" "Not as old as Mama," Diego said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "She's 29. That's really old." Elena laughed, the sound carrying a note of hysteria that only Marcus seemed to catch. "Thanks, baby. You always know just what to say to make me feel better." Diego grinned at his mother, then turned back to Marcus. "Do you want to come play with me at the park? Mama takes me to the park after school sometimes." Marcus felt his heart leap at the invitation. "I would love that, if it's okay with your mama." Elena hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "The park sounds nice." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself sitting on a bench at Riverside Park, watching his son climb on a jungle gym with the fearless abandon that only 5-year-olds possess. Elena sat beside him, both of them quiet as they watched Diego play. "He's incredible," Marcus said softly. "You've done an amazing job with him." Elena's expression was unreadable. "He's a good kid. He makes it easy." Marcus watched Diego attempt to cross the monkey bars, his small face screwed up in concentration. "Tell me about him. What does he like? What's he afraid of? What makes him laugh?" Elena was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "He loves dinosaurs and trucks and building things with Legos. He's afraid of the dark and thunderstorms and the vacuum cleaner. He laughs at silly faces and when I tickle his feet and when he successfully makes pancakes flip in the air. Marcus absorbed each detail like a treasure. 5 years of his son's life, condensed into a few sentences. He helps you make pancakes? Elena smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her all day, every Saturday morning. He stands on a chair at the stove and helps me flip them. He gets more batter on the floor than in the pan, but he's so proud of himself. Marcus felt an ache in his chest at the mental image. Saturday morning pancakes with his son. It was such a simple thing, but it represented everything he had missed, everything he wanted to be part of. "Mama! Mr. Blackwell, look at me!" Diego called from the top of the slide. He waved enthusiastically before launching himself down the steep slide with a whoop of joy. Marcus waved back, marveling at how natural it felt to respond to his son's call for attention. When Diego reached the bottom of the slide, he ran over to where they were sitting. "Did you see how fast I went?" Diego asked breathlessly. "I went super fast." "I saw," Marcus said. "That was very impressive. You're very brave." Diego beamed at the praise, then climbed up onto the bench between Marcus and Elena. "Mr. Blackwell, do you like dinosaurs?" "I do," Marcus said. "Which one is your favorite?" "T-Rex," Diego announced immediately. "They have big teeth and they're the strongest. But Mama likes the flying ones better." "Pterodactyls," Elena clarified. "I like that they could escape if they needed to." Marcus caught the subtle meaning in her words and felt another stab of guilt. Elena had spent 5 years being ready to escape, ready to protect herself and Diego from potential disappointment or abandonment. "What about you, Mr. Blackwell?" Diego asked. "What's your favorite dinosaur?" Marcus considered the question seriously, sensing that his answer mattered to his son. "I think I like the Triceratops," he said finally. "Why?" Diego asked with genuine curiosity. "Because they were protective of their families," Marcus said, looking directly at Elena as he spoke. "They would do anything to keep the people they loved safe." Elena's breath caught slightly, and Marcus saw understanding flicker in her eyes. Diego, oblivious to the undercurrent of adult emotion, nodded approvingly. "That's a good reason," Diego declared. "Family is important." "Yes," Marcus agreed quietly. "Family is the most important thing in the world." They spent another hour at the park, with Diego alternating between playing and running back to share observations or ask questions. Marcus found himself relaxing into the rhythm of it, the way children moved seamlessly between intense focus and scattered attention. He was surprised by how much he enjoyed simply watching Diego explore the world around him. As the afternoon began to cool, Elena announced it was time to go home. Diego protested briefly but accepted the decision with the resignation of a child who knew better than to argue with his mother. "Mr. Blackwell, will I see you again?" Diego asked as they walked back to the car. Marcus glanced at Elena, seeking permission he hoped she would grant. "I hope so," he said. "Would you like that?" Diego nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. Maybe next time you can come to our house and see my dinosaur collection." "I would love to see your dinosaur collection," Marcus said, meaning every word. As they drove Elena and Diego home, Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions settling in his chest. Hope, certainly, but also fear. This first meeting had gone better than he had dared to expect, but he knew it was just the beginning of a much longer and more complicated journey. When they reached Elena's apartment building, a modest complex in a middle-class neighborhood, Marcus felt a pang of guilt at the contrast between her life and his own mansion. Diego bounded out of the car and ran ahead to the building entrance, leaving Marcus and Elena alone for a moment. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for today, for letting me meet him properly." Elena studied his face in the fading daylight. "This is just the beginning, Marcus. Today was easy because it was new and exciting for him. But if you're going to be in his life, there will be hard days too. Days when he's sick or cranky or disappointed. Days when being a parent isn't fun or convenient." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her warning. "I know. I want all of it. The good days and the hard days. I want to be his father, not just a fun stranger who shows up occasionally." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "We'll take it slow," she said finally. "See how it goes. But Marcus, I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Marcus said immediately. "Promise me that if you realize this isn't what you want, you'll tell me right away. Before Diego gets too attached. I won't let him be hurt by someone else walking away." Marcus felt the gravity of her request settle over him like a vow. I promise you, Elena, I'm not going anywhere. I've already lost 5 years of his life. I won't lose another day if I can help it. Elena nodded slowly, then got out of the car. Marcus watched as she walked toward the building where Diego was waiting, bouncing impatiently by the door. Just before they went inside, Diego turned and waved at Marcus through the car window. Marcus waved back, his chest tight with emotion. As he drove home through the evening traffic, one thought kept repeating in his mind. He had a son. Against all odds, in spite of his own blindness and Elena's silence, he had a beautiful, amazing son. But as the initial euphoria began to fade, reality set in. This wasn't just about the joy of discovery. Elena was right. Being a parent meant more than fun afternoons at the park. It meant responsibility and consistency, and putting someone else's needs before his own. It meant learning to love someone more than his own comfort and convenience. Marcus had built his fortune by being strategic, by calculating risks and making smart investments. But parenthood wasn't a business deal. It was a leap of faith into territory where money and power meant nothing, where success was measured in bedtime stories and scraped knees and the trust of a child who had every reason to be wary of the stranger claiming to be his father. That night, Marcus sat in his study with a legal pad, trying to make lists of everything he needed to learn, everything he needed to do. How to talk to a 5-year-old, how to comfort a child who was scared or hurt, what 5-year-olds ate for dinner and when they went to bed, and how to help with homework. But as he sat there with his pen poised over the blank paper, Marcus realized that no amount of planning could prepare him for the reality of being Diego's father. This was going to require something he had very little experience with: improvisation, intuition, and the willingness to make mistakes and learn from them. For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly challenged by something that couldn't be solved with money or strategy. And despite the fear that came with that realization, he found himself looking forward to the challenge. Outside his windows, the city settled into its nighttime rhythms. Somewhere across town, in a modest apartment, his son was probably getting ready for bed, maybe asking his mother about the nice man he had met at the park. The thought filled Marcus with a warmth he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Tomorrow, he would call Elena and ask when he could see Diego again. Tomorrow, he would start the long process of earning his place in his son's life. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Marcus fell asleep not thinking about business deals or profit margins, but about a little boy with dark eyes who collected dinosaurs and helped his mother make pancakes on Saturday mornings. The sound of his phone ringing jerked Marcus awake at 2 in the morning. For a moment, he lay disoriented in his bed, trying to place the unfamiliar emotion that had been coloring his dreams. Then memory flooded back. Diego, Elena, the life-changing revelations of the past 24 hours. Marcus grabbed his phone from the nightstand, his heart immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Elena's name appeared on the caller ID, and a chill ran down his spine. Why would she be calling him in the middle of the night? Elena? What's wrong? He answered immediately. Marcus. Elena's voice was tight with stress. I'm sorry to call so late, but Diego is sick. He has a high fever and he's been asking for you. I don't know why, but he keeps saying he wants Mr. Blackwell to come over. Marcus was already throwing off his covers and reaching for clothes. What's his temperature? Have you called a doctor? It's 103.2. I've given him children's fever reducer, but it's not coming down yet. The pediatric nurse hotline said to bring him to the emergency room if it reaches 104, or if he starts showing other symptoms. Marcus could hear the worry in Elena's voice, the particular strain that came with being a single parent facing a medical crisis in the middle of the night. I'm coming over, he said, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt. What's your address? Elena hesitated for just a moment. Marcus, you don't have to... Elena. He's asking for me. That makes him my responsibility too. What's your address? She gave him the information, and Marcus was in his car within 5 minutes, driving through empty streets with his heart pounding. He had no experience with sick children, no idea what he could do to help. But Diego was asking for him, and that was enough. Elena's apartment building was a 3-story brick structure with external staircases, the kind of place where young families started out before they could afford something bigger. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time to the 2nd floor, finding Elena's door immediately from the number she had given him. Elena answered his knock before he had even finished knocking, as if she had been watching for him through the window. She looked exhausted and worried, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and her clothes rumpled as if she had been trying to sleep in them. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. He's been restless all night, but he got more agitated after I told him I was calling you. Marcus stepped into the small apartment, taking in details quickly. It was clean and cozy, with toys neatly organized in one corner of the living room and children's artwork covering one wall. Everything spoke of a home where a child was loved and cherished, even on a budget that clearly required careful management. "Where is he?" Marcus asked. Elena led him down a short hallway to a small bedroom decorated with dinosaur posters and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Diego was lying in a twin bed, his small body dwarfed by the blankets piled around him. His cheeks were flushed with fever, and his dark hair was damp with sweat. When Diego saw Marcus enter the room, his eyes brightened slightly despite his obvious illness. "Mr. Blackwell," he said in a voice that was hoarse and smaller than usual. "You came." Marcus felt something twist in his chest at the relief in his son's voice. He approached the bed slowly, not wanting to overwhelm the sick child. "Of course I came. Your mama said you weren't feeling well." Diego nodded miserably. "My head hurts, and I'm really hot but also cold and my throat feels scratchy." Marcus looked helplessly at Elena, who was hovering in the doorway with the expression of a mother trying to maintain control in a crisis. "What can I do?" he asked her quietly. "The fever should break soon," Elena said, though her voice carried uncertainty. "The medicine should start working. He wanted you here." Marcus looked back at Diego, who was watching him with eyes that seemed too bright in his flushed face. "Can I sit with you for a while?" Marcus asked gently. Diego nodded and scooted over slightly in the bed, making room. Marcus sat on the edge of the mattress, hyper-aware that this was his first time being truly needed by his son. Elena had managed every crisis, every illness, every middle-of-the-night emergency for 5 years without him. But tonight, for reasons Marcus couldn't understand, Diego wanted his father. "My tummy feels funny too," Diego confided, curling up against Marcus's side with the automatic trust of a sick child seeking comfort. Marcus hesitantly put his arm around his son, marveling at how small Diego felt against him. "I'm sorry you feel bad, buddy. Being sick is no fun." Diego was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Marcus with eyes that seemed far too wise for a 5-year-old. "Mr. Blackwell, are you my daddy?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. In the dim light of the dinosaur nightlight, with his son's fever-bright eyes looking directly into his own, there was no room for evasion or careful explanations. Marcus glanced at Elena, who had gone very still in the doorway. She gave him the slightest nod, a permission he hadn't expected. "Yes," Marcus said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Diego, I'm your daddy." Diego studied his face for a long moment, processing this confirmation of what he had somehow already known. "I thought so," he said matter-of-factly. "You have my eyes." Marcus felt tears threaten at the simple acceptance in his son's voice. "You have my eyes too," he said. "And my stubborn chin." Diego reached up and touched Marcus's chin with one small, hot hand. "Mama says stubborn can be good sometimes. She says it means you don't give up easy." "Your mama is very smart," Marcus said, looking over at Elena, who was wiping at her own eyes. Diego snuggled closer against Marcus's side. "Are you gonna stay now that I know you're my daddy?" The question carried the weight of every fear Elena had expressed about Diego getting too attached too quickly. But looking down at his son's trusting face, Marcus couldn't bring himself to be anything less than completely honest. "If you want me to stay, I'll stay," Marcus said. "I want to be your daddy for real, not just sometimes. But that means we have to learn how to be a family together. And that might take some time." Diego considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important matters. "Like practice?" "Exactly like practice," Marcus agreed. "We'll all have to practice being a family." Diego seemed satisfied with this explanation. He closed his eyes and let his head rest against Marcus's chest. "Will you stay until my fever goes away?" "I'll stay as long as you need me to," Marcus promised. Elena approached the bed quietly and held out a damp cloth. "For his forehead," she explained softly. "It helps cool him down." Marcus took the cloth and gently placed it on Diego's forehead. His son sighed in relief at the cool touch. Elena sat in a chair beside the bed, and for a while, the three of them sat in comfortable silence, united in their concern for Diego's well-being. As the night wore on, Diego's fever began to break. His breathing became less labored, and the flush in his cheeks started to fade. Marcus found himself dozing in and out of sleep, always partially aware of the small body curled against his side. Around 5 in the morning, Diego's fever finally broke completely. He woke up asking for water and announcing that he was hungry, sure signs that the worst was over. Elena made him toast and juice while Marcus helped him wash his face and change into fresh pajamas. "I feel better," Diego announced as he nibbled his toast. "But I'm still tired." "That's normal after being sick," Elena said, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "You should sleep some more." Diego looked up at Marcus hopefully. "Will you stay until I wake up?" Marcus looked questioningly at Elena, who nodded after a moment's hesitation. "I'll stay," Marcus promised. As Diego settled back into sleep, Elena and Marcus found themselves alone in the living room as dawn light began to filter through the windows. The crisis was over, but everything had changed in the space of one long night. "Thank you," Elena said quietly, "for coming, for staying." He's never asked for anyone like that before when he was sick. Marcus shook his head. "Thank you for calling me, for letting me be here for him." Elena was quiet for a moment, studying his face in the gray morning light. "You told him the truth," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "He deserved the truth," Marcus said. "He's known all along, hasn't he?" "Somehow, he's known." Elena nodded slowly. "Children are more intuitive than we give them credit for. He's been asking more questions about his father lately. I think seeing you triggered something he was already feeling." Marcus felt a weight settle on his shoulders. The full responsibility of being Diego's father finally becoming real. "Elena, I know this changes everything. I know you've been doing this alone for 5 years and doing it well. I don't want to disrupt the life you've built for him." Elena looked toward the bedroom where Diego was sleeping. "His life is about to be disrupted whether we like it or not. The question is whether we can manage that disruption in a way that's best for him." Marcus nodded, understanding the delicate balance they would need to find. "What do you need from me? How do we make this work?" Elena was quiet for a long time, and Marcus could see her mind working through all the practical and emotional implications of this new reality. "I need to know that you're committed," she said finally. "Not just to the idea of being his father, but to the daily reality of it. I need to know that when things get hard or inconvenient, you won't just disappear again." Marcus met her eyes steadily. "I was never given the chance to disappear the first time, Elena. You made that decision for both of us. I understand why you did it, and I'm not angry about it anymore. But I need you to understand that I would never willingly walk away from him. Last night proved to me that he needs me, and I need him more than I ever realized." Elena studied his face for signs of doubt or uncertainty. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her. "Okay," she said softly. "Then we figure this out together." Marcus felt a surge of relief and gratitude. "Together," he agreed. As the morning progressed, they talked about practical matters. How often Marcus could see Diego, how to explain the situation to the school, how to handle the eventual questions from Diego about why his father had been absent for the first 5 years of his life. It was overwhelming and complicated, and nothing like any problem Marcus had ever had to solve before. But as he sat in Elena's small living room, listening to the sound of his son's peaceful breathing from the bedroom, Marcus felt more purposeful than he had in years. When Diego woke up later that morning, he was back to his normal, energetic self. He showed Marcus his dinosaur collection, as promised, and they built an elaborate Lego city on the living room floor. Marcus was amazed by his son's creativity and focus, by the way Diego approached each project with absolute concentration and joy. Over the following weeks, Marcus began spending more and more time at Elena's apartment. He would arrive after work to help with dinner and homework, and on weekends, the three of them would explore the city together. Marcus discovered the simple pleasures of children's museums and playground adventures, of reading bedtime stories and helping with bath time. It wasn't always easy. Diego tested boundaries, as all children do, and Marcus had to learn how to be firm without being harsh, how to discipline with love rather than anger. There were moments when he felt completely out of his depth, when he questioned whether he was really cut out for fatherhood. But there were also moments of pure magic. The first time Diego fell asleep in his arms during a movie. The day Diego proudly introduced him to classmates as "my dad." The evening when Diego, frustrated with a difficult puzzle, said, "I get my stubborn from you, Daddy, so I'm gonna keep trying." Elena watched these interactions with careful eyes, gradually relaxing as she saw Marcus's genuine commitment to their son. She began including him in decisions about Diego's activities and schooling, and Marcus felt the enormous privilege of being trusted with someone else's most precious treasure. But just as things seemed to be settling into a new normal, life delivered another curveball that would test everything they had built together. 3 months into their new arrangement, Marcus received a phone call that would shatter the fragile peace they had built. Elena's voice was strained when she called him at his office, asking if they could meet that evening after Diego went to bed. Something in her tone made Marcus's stomach clench with dread. He arrived at her apartment to find Elena pacing the small living room, her hands twisting together with nervous energy. Diego had already been put to bed, and the apartment felt heavy with unspoken tension. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked immediately. "Is Diego okay? Are you okay?" Elena stopped pacing and turned to face him, her expression a mixture of excitement and terror. "I got a job offer," she said quietly. "A really good job offer." Marcus felt relief wash over him. "That's wonderful news." "Where?" Elena's next words hit him like a physical blow. "London. The company wants to relocate me to their international headquarters. It's a promotion, a significant salary increase, and they'll pay for Diego's education at one of the best schools in England." Marcus stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she was telling him. "London," he repeated numbly. "You're talking about moving to London." Elena nodded, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "It's an incredible opportunity, Marcus. The kind of chance I never dreamed I'd have. Diego could grow up with opportunities I could never give him here. He could see the world, get the best education money can buy." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. "But he's happy here. We're building something here. He has friends, routines, stability." "I know," Elena whispered. "But Marcus, this could change everything for him. For us. The salary they're offering is more than I make in 3 years here. Diego could go to university anywhere he wanted, never have to worry about money the way I did growing up." Marcus began pacing the room himself, his mind racing through possibilities and solutions. "I could provide those things for him. Money isn't an issue for me, you know that. I could pay for his education, for anything he needs." Elena's expression hardened slightly. "I can't accept charity from you, Marcus. I won't be dependent on anyone, not even Diego's father. This job would be mine, earned by my own abilities and hard work." Marcus understood her pride, but the thought of losing Diego was unbearable. "When would you have to leave?" "They want me to start in 6 weeks, Elena said. "They're offering a relocation package, help finding housing, everything we would need to make the transition." Marcus felt the walls of the small apartment closing in around him. 6 weeks. He had just found his son, had just begun to build a relationship with him, and now Elena was talking about taking him to another continent. "What does Diego know about this?" Marcus asked. "Nothing yet," Elena admitted. "I wanted to talk to you first. I wanted to see if there was any way to make this work." Marcus looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Elena took a shaky breath. "The company knows about Diego, obviously. They've indicated that if there were family considerations that would make the move difficult, they might be willing to consider alternative arrangements. A different position, perhaps, or a delayed start date." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "So you could turn it down?" Elena's expression grew conflicted. "I could. But Marcus, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. When will I ever get another chance like this? When will Diego get opportunities like what London could offer him?" Marcus sank onto her couch, his head in his hands. "I just found him, Elena. I just found you both. I know I have no right to ask you to give up your dreams, but I can't bear the thought of losing him again." Elena sat beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "You wouldn't lose him completely. There are planes, video calls, holidays. He could spend summers here." Marcus looked up at her, seeing the pain in her eyes that matched his own. "Summers," he repeated flatly. "After missing the first 5 years of his life, I would get summers." Elena reached out and touched his hand. "I don't want to hurt you, Marcus. I don't want to hurt any of us. But I have to think about what's best for Diego's future." Marcus felt anger flare alongside his desperation. And what's best for his future is growing up without his father. What's best is taking him away from the family he's just discovered. Elena pulled her hand back, her own anger rising. "Don't you dare make me the villain here, Marcus. I've been making decisions about what's best for Diego for 5 years while you were living your life without even knowing he existed. I've sacrificed everything for him, and now I have a chance to give him opportunities beyond anything I could provide here." Marcus knew she was right, and that made it even harder to accept. Elena had been an incredible mother, had given Diego a loving, stable home despite limited resources and no support. She deserved success, deserved opportunities, deserved a chance to build the life she wanted. But none of that made the thought of losing Diego any easier to bear. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "You're right. You've been making the hard decisions alone for years. I have no right to guilt you for considering what's best for both of you. Elena's expression softened. I'm scared too, Marcus. Scared of leaving. Scared of staying. Scared of making the wrong choice. This isn't easy for any of us. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marcus spoke. What if I came with you? Elena looked at him in surprise. What? Marcus felt the idea taking shape as he spoke. What if I relocated to London too? I could move my business operations there, at least partially. I have international holdings anyway. It would make sense from a business perspective. Elena stared at him. Marcus, you can't just uproot your entire life because of a decision I'm making. That's not fair to ask of you. Marcus turned to face her fully. You're not asking. I'm offering. Elena, Diego is my son. You're the mother of my child. In the past 3 months, you've both become the most important people in my life. If London is where you need to be, then maybe London is where I need to be too. Elena looked overwhelmed by his suggestion. But your business, your life here, everything you've built. Marcus shrugged. Money can be made anywhere. Businesses can be relocated. But I only have one son, and I've already missed too much of his life. I won't miss any more if I can help it. Elena was quiet for a long time, considering his offer. It would be a huge risk for you, she said finally. What if things don't work out between us? What if Diego has trouble adjusting? What if you hate London? Marcus had been thinking about those same possibilities. Then I'll deal with those problems when they come. But Elena, I can't live with the regret of not trying. I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had fought for my family. Elena's breath caught at his use of the word family. Is that what we are? She asked quietly. A family. Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. For perhaps the first time since this conversation began. Elena was beautiful, intelligent, strong, and devoted to their son. Over the past 3 months, he had come to admire her strength and her wisdom. More than that, he had begun to care for her in ways that went beyond their shared connection to Diego. I hope so, Marcus said honestly. I know this all started because of Diego, but, Elena, somewhere along the way, you stopped being just his mother to me. You became someone I care about, someone I respect, someone I want in my life for reasons that have nothing to do with our son. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, I'm not asking you to make any decisions about us right now. Marcus continued quickly. I know this is complicated and messy, and we're both still figuring things out. But if you're willing to let me try, I'd like to be part of whatever life you're building for yourself and Diego, wherever that life happens to be. Elena was crying openly now, but they seemed like tears of relief rather than sadness. You would really do that? Give up everything here to come with us? Marcus reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. I would really do that. Elena leaned into his touch, and for a moment Marcus glimpsed what their life could be like if they stopped fighting against the circumstances that had brought them together and started embracing the possibilities. We would have to tell Diego, Elena said. About London, about everything. Marcus nodded. How do you think he'll react? Elena managed a watery smile. Knowing Diego, he'll probably ask if they have good dinosaur museums in London. Marcus laughed despite everything. And do they? The Natural History Museum, Elena said. One of the best in the world. Marcus felt hope beginning to replace the panic in his chest. Then I think we have our selling point. The next morning, they sat Diego down for what was undoubtedly going to be one of the most important conversations of his young life. Diego seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, sitting quietly at the kitchen table with his favorite dinosaur toy clutched in his small hands. Diego, Elena began gently, Daddy and I need to talk to you about something very important. Diego's eyes moved between his parents, and Marcus felt a surge of love at hearing Elena refer to him as Diego's daddy without hesitation. Am I in trouble? Diego asked with the immediate concern of a child. No, sweetheart, Elena assured him. You're not in trouble, but Mama got offered a new job, and we need to make some big decisions as a family. Diego perked up at the mention of family decisions. Over the past months, Marcus had made sure to include Diego in age-appropriate choices about their activities and routines, and Diego had come to take pride in being consulted about family matters. What kind of job? Diego asked. Elena explained the London opportunity in terms a 5-year-old could understand, talking about new places and new schools and new adventures. Diego listened with the intense concentration he brought to all important information. Would Daddy come too? Diego asked when Elena finished explaining. Marcus felt his throat tighten at his son's immediate concern about keeping the family together. If you want me to come, I would love to come with you. Diego seemed to consider this carefully. Would I have to leave my friends? Elena nodded. You would, baby. But you would make new friends in London. Diego's face scrunched up in the expression he made when wrestling with difficult concepts. Would we come back to visit? Of course, Marcus said. We would visit whenever you wanted to see your friends here. Diego was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing all the information they had given him. Finally, he looked up at them with the matter-of-fact acceptance that consistently amazed Marcus. Okay, Diego said simply. But can we go see the dinosaur museum Mama told me about? Elena and Marcus exchanged glances over Diego's head, both fighting smiles at their son's priorities. We can definitely go see the dinosaur museum, Marcus promised. Diego nodded approvingly, then returned his attention to his toy dinosaur as if they had just discussed something as simple as what to have for lunch. That's it? Elena asked. You're okay with moving to London? Diego looked up at her with eyes that held wisdom beyond his years. Mama, as long as we're all together, I don't care where we live. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears at his son's simple truth. In that moment, he understood that Diego had learned something from his young life that Marcus was still learning. Home wasn't a place, it was the people you loved. Over the following weeks, the logistics of relocating 3 lives to another continent proved to be both overwhelming and oddly bonding. Marcus threw himself into the challenge with the same intensity he brought to any major business undertaking, but with an emotional investment he had never experienced before. He met with lawyers about international custody arrangements, even though Elena assured him it wasn't necessary. He researched schools in London, neighborhoods that would be good for families, activities that would help Diego adjust to a new country. He began the process of establishing a London office for his company, something he had been considering for business reasons but had never prioritized. Elena seemed alternately amazed and overwhelmed by Marcus's thoroughness in planning their move. She had expected to handle most of the logistics herself, as she had handled everything else in her life. But Marcus insisted on being involved in every detail. You don't have to do all this, Elena told him one evening as they sat surrounded by immigration paperwork and school applications. Diego was asleep in his room, exhausted from a day of excitement about their upcoming adventure. I want to do all this, Marcus replied, looking up from the international business regulations he was studying. Elena, for 5 years you've handled everything alone. Let me help carry the load now. Elena studied his face in the lamplight. It's still hard for me, she admitted, letting someone else be responsible for things that affect Diego. I've been making all the decisions by myself for so long. Marcus set down his papers and moved to sit beside her on the couch. I know. And I'm not trying to take over or make decisions without you. But we're a team now, aren't we? Teams work together. Elena leaned against his shoulder, and Marcus felt the rightness of it, the way they seemed to fit together, despite all the complications that had brought them to this point. When did this happen? Elena asked quietly. When did what happen? When did we become a team? When did this stop being just about Diego and start being about us? Marcus considered her question carefully. I think it happened gradually, he said. Maybe it started that night when Diego was sick and you called me. Or maybe it was the first time you trusted me to help with his bath time. Or the first time you asked my opinion about something that mattered to you. Elena tilted her head to look at him. And when did you know you wanted it to be about us? Marcus met her eyes steadily. The day you told me about London, and my first thought wasn't just about losing Diego. It was about losing you too. Elena's breath caught, and Marcus saw his own growing feelings reflected in her expression. Marcus, I know this is complicated, Marcus said quietly. I know we came together because of Diego, and I know you have every reason to be cautious about trusting me with your heart, the way you've trusted me with our son. But Elena, what I feel for you is real. It's not just about Diego anymore. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus felt his heart hammering as he waited for her response. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared, she said. I'm scared of needing you too much. I'm scared of Diego getting hurt if things don't work out between us. I'm scared of making mistakes that affect more than just me. Marcus understood her fears because they mirrored his own. I'm scared too, he admitted. I'm scared of letting you both down. I'm scared of not being good enough at this family thing. I'm scared of making promises I don't know how to keep. Elena lifted her head to look at him directly. So what do we do with all that fear? Marcus thought about Diego's simple acceptance of their London plans, his son's instinctive understanding that love was more important than geography. "Maybe we try anyway," he said. "Maybe we take it one day at a time and see what happens." Elena searched his eyes for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "One day at a time," she agreed. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, a promise and a beginning all wrapped into one tender gesture. The final weeks before their departure passed in a blur of farewell parties, packing, and administrative details. Diego handled the transition with the resilience that seemed to be his natural state, asking practical questions about their new home, and saying goodbye to his friends with the confidence of a child who trusted his parents to take care of him. Marcus found himself dreading the actual moment of leaving more than he had expected. Despite his isolation of the past few years, this city was where he had built his life, where his parents were buried, where he had first become successful. Leaving felt like closing a chapter of his life that he wasn't entirely ready to finish. But then he would watch Diego and Elena planning their new adventure together, and he would remember that some chapters needed to end before better ones could begin. The night before their flight, Marcus stood in his empty house, surrounded by the echoes of a life he was choosing to leave behind. Most of his belongings had been shipped ahead or put in storage. The house would be maintained by his staff, but would remain empty until he decided what to do with it permanently. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Diego wants to know if you're coming to breakfast tomorrow before we leave for the airport." Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." The next morning, he found Elena's apartment in controlled chaos as she managed the final details of their departure. Diego was eating pancakes at the kitchen table, chattering excitedly about the airplane and whether they would be able to see clouds from the windows. "Daddy," Diego called when Marcus arrived. "Mama made extra pancakes for you." Marcus accepted the plate Elena handed him, marveling at how natural this felt, how right it was to be included in these simple morning rituals that made up the fabric of family life. "Are you excited about the plane ride?" Marcus asked Diego as he sat down at the small table. Diego nodded enthusiastically. "Mama says it takes 8 hours to get to London." "That's longer than I sleep at night." Marcus laughed. "It is a long time. Good thing they have movies on the plane. And you and Mama will be with me the whole time," Diego added with satisfaction. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion at his son's casual assumption that his parents would be there to take care of him. It was such a simple thing, but for a child who had spent the first 5 years of his life with only one parent, the security of having both his mother and father present was clearly meaningful. As they finished breakfast and made their way to the airport, Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely billionaire living in isolation, convinced that success was measured in dollars and market share. Today, he was a father and partner, about to relocate his entire life to support the family he was still learning how to be part of. The transformation should have been terrifying, but instead, it felt like coming alive after years of sleepwalking through his own existence. On the plane, Diego fell asleep between his parents somewhere over the Atlantic, his small hand curled around Marcus's finger and his head resting against Elena's shoulder. Marcus looked across his sleeping son at Elena, who was watching Diego with the tender expression that never failed to move him. "No regrets?" Elena asked softly. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Ask me again in a year," he said. "But so far this feels like the best decision I've ever made." Elena smiled and reached across Diego to squeeze Marcus's free hand. "Ask me again in a year too," she said. "But I think we're going to be okay." Marcus squeezed her hand back, thinking about the uncertainty and possibility that lay ahead of them. They would have to find a new home, establish new routines, build new relationships. Diego would have to adjust to a new school and new friends. Marcus would have to prove himself in new business markets. Elena would have to succeed in a demanding new job while navigating a new country. There would be challenges they couldn't anticipate, problems they would have to solve together, moments when they would question whether they had made the right choice. But as Marcus sat on that plane with his son's hand in his, and Elena's smile warming him more than any first-class amenity ever could, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with an uncertain future. Their new life in London began with the organized chaos that comes with relocating a family across an ocean. The company had arranged temporary housing for Elena and Diego while they searched for something permanent, and Marcus had rented a serviced apartment nearby. They had agreed to take things slowly, to let Diego adjust to the new country before making any major changes to his living situation. But within days, the artificial separation began to feel ridiculous. Diego wanted his father around for bedtime stories and morning pancakes. Elena found herself calling Marcus for advice about everything from which grocery store to try to how to register Diego for local activities. Marcus discovered that his temporary apartment felt empty and pointless when his family was just a few blocks away. 2 weeks into their London adventure, as they sat in Hyde Park watching Diego feed ducks at the Serpentine, Elena brought up the subject they had all been dancing around. "This is silly," she said without preamble. "You spending money on an apartment you barely use while we're rattling around in corporate housing that's too big for 2 people." Marcus had been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to pressure her. "What are you suggesting?" Elena watched Diego chase a particularly bold duck, his laughter carrying across the water. "I'm suggesting we find a place together. A real home for all 3 of us." Marcus felt his heart skip at her words. "Are you sure? We said we would take things slowly." Elena turned to look at him directly. "Marcus, we've taken this slowly for 5 years without meaning to. Diego is happy, he's adjusting well, and he asks me every night when you're going to live with us for real. I think slow might be overrated." Marcus grinned, feeling a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the crisp London air. "In that case, I know a very good real estate agent." Finding the right house became a family project that consumed their weekends and filled their evenings with property listings and neighborhood research. Diego insisted on having input in the decision, which meant their criteria included proximity to good parks, interesting trees to climb, and at least 3 bedrooms because guests needed somewhere to sleep when they visited. They found their home in Notting Hill, a 4-bedroom Victorian house with a small garden and enough character to satisfy Elena's aesthetic sensibilities, while being practical enough for modern family life. Diego claimed the bedroom with built-in bookshelves and announced his intention to fill them with books about dinosaurs and space and how things worked. Marcus had never felt the particular satisfaction that came with buying a home for people he loved rather than for himself. Every decision, from the color of Diego's walls to the size of the kitchen table, was made with their happiness and comfort in mind. It was an entirely different experience from his previous real estate transactions, which had been purely financial calculations. The day they moved in, Diego ran through the empty rooms with uncontainable excitement, his voice echoing off the walls as he narrated an elaborate story about the adventures they would have in their new house. Elena stood in the kitchen, surrounded by boxes and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change they had undertaken. "Second thoughts?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Elena leaned back against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Not second thoughts," she said. "Just amazement, I guess. 6 months ago, I was cleaning your house and hiding the fact that we had a son together. Now we're buying a house together in London, and Diego calls you daddy without hesitation. It's a lot of change very quickly." Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Good change?" Elena turned in his arms to face him. "Very good change. Scary sometimes, but very good." Diego came skidding into the kitchen at that moment, his socks sliding on the hardwood floors. "Mama? Daddy, come see my room. I found a secret hiding place behind the bookshelf." Marcus and Elena exchanged amused glances. "A secret hiding place?" Marcus asked seriously. "That sounds very important." Diego grabbed both their hands and pulled them toward the stairs. "It is. I'm going to keep my most special treasures there." As they followed their son upstairs to admire his discovery, Marcus felt the deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you belong. This house, these people, this life they were building together. It was worth every risk they had taken, every fear they had conquered, every comfortable routine they had left behind. Elena's new job proved to be everything she had hoped and more. The company valued her insights and gave her responsibilities that challenged her intelligence and creativity. She thrived in the international environment, building relationships with colleagues from around the world and contributing to projects that had global impact. Marcus found that establishing his London operations was easier than he had anticipated. His business acumen translated well across cultures, and his reputation preceded him in ways that opened doors and created opportunities. More importantly, he discovered that success felt different when he had people to share it with at the end of each day. Diego adapted to his new school with the resilience that continued to amaze his parents. He made friends quickly, charmed his teachers with his earnest questions about everything from British history to the differences between American and English spelling, and announced regularly that London was brilliant, a word he had picked up from his classmates and used with great satisfaction. But it was the small moments that truly marked their success as a family. Saturday morning pancakes in their sunny kitchen, with Diego standing on a step stool to help flip them just as he had in their old life. Evening walks through Hyde Park, with Diego running ahead to investigate interesting trees or playground equipment while his parents followed, hands linked and conversation flowing easily between them. The bedtime routine they established in their new house, with Marcus reading adventure stories in different voices, while Elena and Diego curled up on either side of him, listening with equal attention to tales of pirates and dragons and brave children who saved the day. These moments felt miraculous to Marcus, not because they were extraordinary, but because they were so beautifully ordinary. This was what he had been missing without knowing it, the quiet joy of being needed and loved, of having people who depended on him not for his wealth or his business connections, but simply for his presence in their daily lives. 6 months into their London adventure, Marcus was working late in his home office when Elena appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea and an expression that was equal parts nervous and excited. "Can I interrupt?" she asked. Marcus immediately closed his laptop and gestured for her to join him. "Always. Is everything okay? Is Diego okay?" Elena settled into the chair across from his desk and handed him one of the cups. "Diego's fine. He's asleep. I wanted to talk to you about something." Marcus felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. In his experience, "I wanted to talk to you about something" was rarely followed by good news. "What's on your mind?" Elena took a sip of her tea, clearly gathering her courage. "My company wants to offer me another promotion," she said. "A significant one." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "Another relocation?" Elena shook her head quickly. "No, nothing like that. This would be here in London, but it would mean more responsibility, more travel, more demands on my time." Marcus relaxed slightly. "That sounds like good news. You deserve recognition for your work." Elena smiled at his immediate support, but her expression remained uncertain. "It is good news, professionally. But Marcus, the position would require some international travel. Not constantly, but maybe 1 week a month, sometimes 2. I would be away from home more, away from Diego more." Marcus began to understand her dilemma. "And you're worried about the impact on Diego?" Elena nodded. "He's been through so much change already. We just got settled here, just established routines. I don't want to disrupt his stability again, but I also don't want to pass up an opportunity that could set us up financially for his future." Marcus studied her face, seeing the conflict between her professional ambitions and her maternal instincts. "What does your gut tell you?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "That I want the job," she said honestly. "That I'm excited about the challenges it would bring, the projects I would get to work on, but also that I'm scared about what it might cost us as a family." Marcus reached across the desk and took her hand. "Elena, what if I told you that I could handle the single-parent responsibilities when you travel? What if you knew that Diego would be taken care of, that his routines would be maintained, that he would be safe and happy even when you're away?" Elena looked surprised. "Marcus, that's a huge responsibility. Diego can be a handful when his routine gets disrupted. And there's school pickup and homework and dinner and bedtime and—" Marcus squeezed her hand. "And I'm his father. This is what fathers do, isn't it? Support their partners' careers and share the load of raising their children?" Elena stared at him for a long moment. "You would really do that? Take on full parenting responsibility for a week at a time?" Marcus felt a flash of hurt that she seemed surprised by his willingness. "Elena, I know I'm still learning how to be Diego's father, but I'm not a babysitter. I'm his parent. If you need to travel for work, then Diego and I will figure out how to handle things while you're gone." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that you weren't capable. It's just, I've been the primary parent for so long that it's hard for me to trust anyone else with that responsibility, even you." Marcus understood her protectiveness, but he also felt the need to establish his place in their family dynamic. "I know you've been doing this alone for 5 years and you've done an incredible job, but we're partners now, Elena. We're a team. That means I need you to trust me with our son, and you need to feel free to pursue your dreams without worrying that you're being selfish or neglectful." Elena wiped at her eyes and gave him a watery smile. "When did you get so wise about family dynamics?" Marcus laughed. "I have no idea. I'm making this up as I go along, just like you are." Elena squeezed his hand. "So you really think I should take the promotion?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the question seriously. "I think you should take it if you want it. I think Diego is lucky to have a mother who works hard and pursues her goals, and I think he'll be proud to tell his friends that his mama has an important job helping people around the world." Elena smiled, the uncertainty leaving her expression for the first time since she had entered his office. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" The words slipped out so naturally that it took both of them a moment to realize what she had said. Elena's eyes went wide, and Marcus felt his heart stop completely. Elena started to backtrack, but Marcus was already around the desk and pulling her into his arms. "I love you too," he said against her hair. "I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but didn't want to pressure you or make things more complicated than they already are." Elena pulled back to look at him, her face glowing with happiness and relief. "Really?" Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "Really. I love you, Elena. I love the way you make pancakes on Saturday mornings, and the way you sing Diego to sleep when he has nightmares. I love your fierce independence and your generous heart. I love the way you make me want to be a better man, a better father, a better partner." Elena stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, a kiss that tasted like tea and promises and the kind of love that builds slowly and lasts forever. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. "So," Elena said with a shaky laugh, "I guess I should accept that promotion." Marcus grinned. "I guess you should." Elena did accept the promotion, and true to his word, Marcus stepped up to handle solo parenting duties during her business trips. The first few times were challenging, as he learned to navigate school drop-offs and homework supervision without Elena's guidance. But he and Diego found their rhythm. Those weeks when it was just the two of them became precious bonding time. Marcus learned things about his son that only came out in the quiet moments between father and child. Diego's secret worry about whether his goldfish missed him when he was at school. His dream of becoming a paleontologist who discovered new dinosaur species. His unconscious habit of arranging his stuffed animals in order of size before bed. Diego, for his part, seemed to relish having his father's undivided attention. They established their own traditions for Elena's travel weeks. Elaborate breakfast experiments that usually ended in kitchen disasters. Impromptu trips to museums or parks when homework was finished early, and bedtime stories where Marcus had to do different voices for all the characters. When Elena returned from these trips, she found her two favorite people had developed inside jokes and shared memories that didn't include her. And rather than feeling left out, she felt grateful. Diego was building a real relationship with his father, one that existed independently of her mediation or guidance. The three of them settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable and joyful. Elena thrived in her new role. Marcus continued to build his London business presence, and Diego grew taller and more confident by the day. They became the kind of family that other families envied, not because their life was perfect, but because their love for each other was obvious and unshakable. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, life delivered a test that would challenge everything they had built together. It was a rainy Thursday evening in November when Marcus's phone rang with news that would change everything. He was helping Diego with a math worksheet at the kitchen table while Elena prepared dinner, their house filled with the comfortable sounds of family life. The caller ID showed his lawyer's name, which was unusual for evening hours. Marcus almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Marcus, I'm sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know immediately," his lawyer said without preamble. "There's been a development in your father's estate." Marcus felt confusion wash over him. "My father's estate was settled 2 years ago. That's what we thought," the lawyer continued. "But it turns out there was a safety deposit box that no one knew about. The bank just contacted us. Apparently your father had been paying the fees through an automatic withdrawal from an account we weren't aware of." Marcus stepped away from the table, lowering his voice so as not to alarm Elena and Diego. "What was in the box?" "Documents, mostly. Some financial papers, but also—" "Marcus, there were letters. Letters addressed to you that were never delivered." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What kind of letters?" "I think you should come back to New York to handle this in person. Some of these documents they're going to require your immediate attention." Marcus glanced back at Elena and Diego, who were now working on the math problems together, Diego explaining his reasoning with the earnest concentration that never failed to make Marcus smile. "Can you give me a general idea of what we're dealing with?" Marcus asked. His lawyer was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, there are documents in that box that suggest your father may have known about Diego before he died." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I didn't even know about Diego then." "I know. But Marcus, one of the letters is addressed to Elena Rodriguez, and it's dated 3 months before your parents' accident." Marcus sank into the chair in his home office, his mind reeling. His father had somehow known about Diego, had somehow known about Elena, and had kept that knowledge secret while Marcus grieved for parents he thought had died without ever knowing they had a grandson. "I need to see those letters," Marcus said quietly. "I can arrange for you to fly back this weekend," his lawyer offered. "This is something you'll want to handle personally." Marcus agreed to the trip, his mind already racing through the implications of what his lawyer had told him. After hanging up, he sat in his office for several minutes, trying to process what he had just learned. Elena appeared in the doorway, concern evident on her face. "Is everything okay? You looked upset when you took that call." Marcus looked up at her. This woman he loved, who had been keeping her own secrets when they first met, and realized he was about to uncover secrets that could change everything between them once again. "I need to go back to New York this weekend," he said carefully. "There's been a development with my father's estate that requires my attention." Elena studied his expression. "What kind of development?" Marcus hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My lawyer says there were documents my father left behind that mention you and Diego. Documents that suggest he knew about Diego before he died." Elena went very still. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus stood and moved toward her. "Elena, is there something you haven't told me? Something about my father?" Elena's face had gone pale, and Marcus felt his heart sink at her obvious distress. "Elena?" She closed her eyes and took a shuddering breath. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "I've been trying to find the right time, but there never seemed to be a good moment." Marcus felt the world shift around him. "Tell me what?" Elena opened her eyes and met his gaze, tears threatening to spill over. "Your father contacted me, Marcus. About 6 months before he died. He somehow found out about Diego, and he reached out to me." Marcus stared at her, feeling like he was hearing words in a foreign language. "He contacted you? How? Why didn't you tell me?" Elena's tears began to fall in earnest. "Because he asked me not to. Because he said you weren't ready to be a father, that you needed time to mature before you could handle the responsibility of a child." Marcus felt anger and hurt warring in his chest. "And you believed him?" Elena's chin lifted with a flash of defensive pride. "He offered to provide for Diego financially if I would agree to keep his existence secret from you for a few more years. He said he wanted to watch from a distance, to make sure Diego was cared for, but that telling you immediately would only hurt everyone involved." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to process the magnitude of this betrayal. "So you took money from my father to keep my son away from me?" Elena flinched as if he had struck her. "It wasn't like that, Marcus. I was struggling financially, Diego needed things I couldn't afford, and your father seemed to genuinely care about Diego's well-being." Marcus felt something fundamental shifting in his understanding of the past 2 years. "How long did this arrangement go on?" Elena wiped at her eyes. "Until your father died. The payments stopped after the accident, and I never heard from anyone in your family again." Marcus stared at her, pieces of a puzzle falling into place. "Is that why you took the job at my house? Because the money from my father stopped?" Elena nodded miserably. "I needed work, and when I saw the posting for the housekeeper position, I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe it was time for you to know about Diego." Marcus felt betrayed on multiple levels. By his father for keeping this secret, by Elena for maintaining it, and by the circumstances that had manipulated all of them into this situation. "I can't believe this," he said quietly. "All this time, I thought you had hidden Diego from me because you thought I wouldn't want him. But you hid him because my father paid you to." Elena stepped toward him, her expression desperate. "Marcus, please try to understand. I was a single mother with no family support and limited resources. Your father offered Diego opportunities I never could have provided on my own. Private school, medical care, a college fund. How could I turn that down for the sake of my pride?" Marcus understood her reasoning, but that didn't make the deception hurt any less. "And when you came to work for me? When we started building a relationship? When were you planning to tell me the truth?" Elena's shoulders sagged with defeat. "I don't know. Every day I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid you would hate me for keeping it from you. I was afraid you would think I was just after your money, like your father had suggested." Marcus felt exhausted by the weight of these revelations. "I need to go to New York and see what else my father left behind. We'll talk about this when I get back." Elena reached out to touch his arm. "Marcus, please don't let this change things between us. I love you, and Diego loves you, and what we have together is real regardless of how it started." Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm, then gently removed it. "I know you love me, Elena, but right now, I need some time to process the fact that our entire relationship has been built on a lie." Elena's face crumpled, but she nodded and stepped back. "I understand." Marcus walked past her toward the stairs, needing to pack for his unexpected trip and needing space to think. As he reached the top of the stairs, he heard Diego calling from his bedroom. "Daddy, can you come read me a story?" Marcus paused, his heart clenching at his son's trusting voice. Whatever secrets and lies had shaped the past, Diego was innocent in all of this. Diego deserved a father who could separate his anger at the adults from his love for his child. Marcus took a deep breath and headed toward Diego's room, determined to give his son the bedtime routine he expected and deserved, even as Marcus's world crumbled around the edges. The flight to New York gave Marcus 8 hours to think about everything Elena had revealed, and by the time he landed, his anger had settled into something more complex. He was hurt by her deception, certainly, but he was beginning to understand the impossible position his father had put her in. Meeting with his lawyer and examining the contents of his father's safety deposit box only deepened Marcus's confusion about his father's motivations. Along with the financial documents were photographs of Diego that Elena must have provided, report cards from Diego's preschool, and medical records showing a healthy, thriving child. There was also a letter addressed to Marcus that his father had apparently never intended to send. In it, his father expressed regret for keeping Diego's existence secret, but explained his belief that Marcus needed to mature before he could be a good father. The letter spoke of watching Marcus's workaholic lifestyle and emotional detachment, and his father's fear that Marcus would either reject Diego entirely or raise him to be as isolated and emotionally unavailable as Marcus himself had become. The letter that hurt the most was one addressed to Elena, dated just weeks before his father's death. In it, his father expressed his intention to bring Marcus and Diego together gradually, starting with anonymous photos and stories about Diego that would prepare Marcus for the eventual revelation. His father had been planning to tell Marcus the truth, but the car accident had made that impossible. Reading his father's words, Marcus felt his anger toward Elena beginning to fade. She had been as much a victim of his father's manipulation as Marcus himself had been. His father had convinced her that secrecy was in everyone's best interest, and she had trusted the judgment of a man who claimed to know his own son better than anyone. The most shocking document was a will addendum that provided for Diego's complete financial security, including a trust fund that would pay for his education through graduate school and provide a substantial inheritance when he reached 30. His father had loved Diego from a distance and had made sure he would be cared for regardless of what happened. Marcus spent 3 days in New York, meeting with lawyers and accountants to understand the full scope of his father's secret planning. By the time he boarded the plane back to London, he had a clearer picture of how his father had orchestrated events from behind the scenes. But he also had a deeper appreciation for Elena's courage in eventually bringing Diego into Marcus's life, despite the risk of losing the financial security his father had provided. She could have continued to live off his father's arrangements indefinitely, but she had chosen to take the job at Marcus's house and open the door to the truth. The flight back to London gave Marcus time to think about what kind of man he wanted to be going forward. He could hold on to his anger about the deception, or he could focus on the fact that Elena's choices had ultimately led to him finding his son and building the family he never knew he wanted. Elena was waiting for him at Heathrow, her face anxious and uncertain. She had left Diego with a babysitter, clearly wanting to have this conversation without their son's innocent presence. "How was New York?" she asked cautiously as they drove home through London traffic. Marcus studied her profile as she navigated the busy streets, noting the tension in her shoulders and the careful distance she was maintaining between them. "Enlightening," he said finally. "My father left quite a paper trail of his involvement in Diego's life." Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I know you must hate me for not telling you everything from the beginning." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, watching the familiar neighborhoods of their London life pass outside the window. "I don't hate you, Elena. I was angry, and I was hurt, but I don't hate you." Elena glanced at him quickly before returning her attention to the road. "But you don't trust me anymore." Marcus considered her statement carefully. "I think I understand now why you made the choices you did. My father put you in an impossible position, and you did what you thought was best for Diego. I can't fault you for that." Elena pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of them moved to get out of the car. "So where does that leave us?" she asked quietly. Marcus turned to face her fully. "It leaves us with a choice, Elena. We can let my father's manipulations and the secrets of the past define our relationship, or we can decide that what we've built together is stronger than the circumstances that brought us here." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "What do you want to choose?" Marcus reached out and took her hand, the familiar gesture feeling both natural and fragile. "I want to choose us. I want to choose our family." I want to choose to trust you going forward, even though the past is complicated. Elena squeezed his hand tightly. I want that too. But Marcus, I need you to know that there are no more secrets. Everything is out in the open now. Marcus brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Good. Because I've had enough secrets to last a lifetime. They sat in the car for a few more minutes, holding hands and watching their house, the home they had chosen together, the life they had built from the ashes of deception and misunderstanding. Diego missed you, Elena said finally. He kept asking when you were coming home. Marcus felt his heart warm at the thought of his son waiting for his return. I missed him too. I missed both of you. Elena smiled for the first time since he had left for New York. He has something he wants to show you. A project he's been working on while you were gone. Marcus grinned. I can't wait to see it. As they walked toward their front door together, Marcus felt the last of his anger and hurt dissolving into something more constructive. The past would always be complicated, but the future was theirs to write together. Diego came running to the door as soon as he heard their voices, launching himself into Marcus's arms with the enthusiasm that never failed to remind Marcus of how lucky he was to be this child's father. Daddy, you're home! I made something for you, Diego announced, pulling back to look at Marcus's face. But first, did you miss me? Marcus hugged his son tighter, breathing in the familiar scent of childhood that always clung to Diego's hair. I missed you more than all the stars in the sky, he said, using one of their established phrases for expressing big emotions. Diego giggled at the familiar response. I missed you more than all the dinosaurs that ever lived. Marcus set Diego down and knelt to his level. That's a lot of missing. Now, what did you make for me? Diego grabbed Marcus's hand and pulled him toward the kitchen, chattering excitedly about his project. On the kitchen table was a large piece of construction paper covered with Diego's careful printing and colorful drawings. I made a family tree, Diego announced proudly. Look, there's you and Mama and me, and I drew our house in London, and I put Abuelo even though he died because Mama says family doesn't stop being family just because they're not here anymore. Marcus studied the drawing, his throat tightening with emotion. Diego had drawn stick figures representing their family, connected by colorful lines and surrounded by hearts and stars. At the bottom of the paper, in Diego's careful kindergarten handwriting, were the words, My family is perfect because we love each other. This is beautiful, Diego, Marcus said, his voice slightly hoarse. Can we hang it on the refrigerator? Diego beamed with pride. Yes! And Daddy, I drew you with a smile because you're always happy when you're with me and Mama. Marcus glanced at Elena, who was watching this interaction with tears in her eyes. Despite everything that had brought them together, despite the secrets and complications and adult mistakes, they had created something pure and beautiful in Diego's understanding of family. That night, after Diego was asleep and the house was quiet, Marcus and Elena sat in their living room with cups of tea and had the conversation that would define their future. I've been thinking about something, Marcus said, setting down his cup and turning to face Elena fully. Elena waited for him to continue, her expression open but cautious. I want to ask you to marry me, Marcus said quietly. Not because of Diego, not because of guilt or obligation, or any of the complicated reasons that brought us together, but because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life building something real with you. Elena's breath caught, and Marcus could see the hope and fear warring in her expression. But, Marcus continued, I want to make sure we're starting fresh. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas, no more outside influences shaping our decisions. Just us, choosing each other and choosing our family. Elena set down her own cup and moved closer to him on the couch. Are you asking me to marry you right now? Marcus smiled, feeling lighter than he had in days. I'm asking if you would be willing to consider marrying me if I asked properly, with a ring and a proposal that Diego could help plan. Elena laughed, the sound bright and full of relief. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I would be willing to consider that. Marcus kissed her then, a kiss that felt like a promise and a new beginning. When they broke apart, both were smiling. So, Elena said, when are you going to ask properly? Marcus grinned. I was thinking I should probably talk to Diego first. Get his permission to marry his mother. Elena's expression softened. He would love that. He would love feeling like he's part of the decision. Marcus pulled her closer, marveling at how right this felt, how natural it was to plan a future with this woman and their son. What do you think he'll say? Elena settled against his side, her head on his shoulder. I think he'll ask if you're going to have a big party with cake. Marcus laughed. And are we? Elena tilted her head to look at him. Would you want a big party with cake? Marcus considered the question seriously. A year ago, the thought of a large social gathering would have filled him with dread. But now, the idea of celebrating their family with friends and community felt exactly right. I think I would like a party where Diego can help plan the menu and invite his friends and show everyone his family tree drawing, Marcus said. Elena smiled. That sounds perfect. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thoughts of the future they were planning. Outside their windows, London settled into its nighttime rhythms. But inside their house, everything felt peaceful and complete. 6 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning in their garden, Marcus knelt down in front of Diego with a small velvet box in his hands. Diego, he said seriously, I want to ask your mama to marry me, but first I wanted to ask your permission. Would it be okay with you if I became your mama's husband? Diego considered this question with the gravity he brought to all important matters. If you marry mama, does that mean you'll be my daddy forever and ever? Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. Yes, buddy. It means I'll be your daddy forever and ever, no matter what. Diego nodded approvingly. And we'll still live in our house with the secret hiding place? We'll still live in our house, Marcus confirmed. Diego's face broke into a wide grin. Then yes. But can I help you ask her? I have ideas about how to make it really special. Marcus laughed and pulled his son into a hug. I would love your help. 20 minutes later, Elena found herself being led into their garden by a very excited Diego who insisted she needed to see something urgent outside. Marcus was waiting for them under the apple tree they had planted together when they first moved in, surrounded by flowers that Diego had helped him arrange. Elena, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. 6 months ago, you asked me what I wanted to choose. I chose us then, and I'm choosing us again now. He dropped to one knee, and Elena's hands flew to her mouth as Diego bounced excitedly beside her. Elena Rodriguez, Marcus continued, will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Diego for the rest of my life? Will you help me keep learning how to be the man and father you both deserve? Elena was crying openly now, but her voice was strong when she answered. Yes, Marcus, yes to all of it. Diego whooped with joy as Marcus slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, and then their son was in the middle of their embrace, hugging both his parents and talking excitedly about the wedding party they were going to have. As Marcus held his family in the garden of the home they had built together, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had been messy and complicated and full of secrets and mistakes, but it had also been real and transformative and ultimately beautiful. He had started as a lonely billionaire who thought success was measured in profit margins and market share. He was ending as a man who understood that the only success that mattered was the love of the people who called him husband and father. 6 months later, they stood in that same garden surrounded by friends and family, exchanging vows that Diego had helped write and celebrating with a party that included both dinosaur decorations and elegant flowers, a perfect reflection of their blended life. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Diego cheered loudly from his place as ring-bearer, and Marcus knew that this moment, this family, this love, this life they had built from the ashes of loneliness and deception, was the greatest achievement of his existence. That night, as they tucked Diego into bed in the house that now legally belonged to all three of them, their son looked up at his parents with sleepy contentment. Mama, Daddy, he said, are we going to be a family forever now? Elena and Marcus exchanged glances over their son's head, both thinking about the long journey that had brought them here. Forever and always, Marcus said, meaning every word. Diego smiled and closed his eyes, secure in the knowledge that his family was complete and permanent and built on love that would last. As Marcus and Elena stood in the doorway watching their son sleep, Marcus felt the deep peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. This was his life now, not the isolated existence he had once thought was enough, but a rich, complex, beautiful life full of pancake breakfasts and bedtime stories and the daily miracle of being loved unconditionally. He had found his family in the most unexpected way, but he had found them. And he would spend the rest of his life being grateful for the afternoon when a little boy with familiar eyes had looked at him through a car window and whispered the word that changed everything. Dad.